Welcome to the next lesson in the WiSys Form Studio video training series. Today we're going to continue with our inventory receipt form and finish up the buttons on the form by adding additional buttons and actions to both new and existing buttons. So let's get started by launching Form Studio, our database, and our training project. And we're going to go ahead and copy the form. And we want to open and use this form. So it's a WiSys standard to have 3 buttons, or at least 3 buttons on every form. They are the clear button, a close button, and then the action button. So I'm going to add the missing buttons. So I'm going to add another button and another button. And we'll call this one BTN Clear. I'm going to add an action to this button. And that action is going to be clear form. And you'll notice that you can either clear to a specific field on the form, or you can clear the entire form. So in this case, we want to clear the entire form. Close. And then our button for close. And the action here is going to be a close form action. And if you also remember a few lessons ago when we created a very simple form to get it to perform a Macola business transaction, we added an action to the receive button to do an inventory transaction receipt. If we go ahead and edit that, we'll notice that because we didn't have bin or lot fields on the form and any logic to determine whether the item being received was binned or lotted, we didn't pass any bin or lot information to this form. So what we need to do is go ahead and add the bin properties to this action. And we need to repeat the quantity, and then the rest are just user-defined fields. So we're going to call this an inventory transaction receipt for non-serialized items. We're going to go ahead and say next, and then finish. So since we called this one non-serialized items, we need to put a conditional check to determine whether or not it should execute this action. So I'm going to go ahead and click this button to add a formula in new, and we're going to call this non-serialized. And we're going to check our serial lot flag that we retrieved with one of our validations, and we're going to check to see if it's not S. And go ahead and say add, and then save. So since we added a conditional formula here, if our serial lot flag is an N or an L, it's going to execute this transaction. So one thing I forgot is I'm going to go ahead and edit my action again, and I added the bin properties, but I forgot to add the serial lot properties. So if it's a lotted item, we need to fill in this information as well. So we need the quantity from the screen and then the value that's in our lot field on the form. And that should be all. So we can go ahead and hit next, and then finish. And again, what we want to do is add another business transaction so that we can pass serialized if we're doing a receipt for a serialized item. So we're going to go ahead and add the business transaction and find our receipt. And our main properties, we need to fill this, the cost is -1, which again means it's going to just use the default cost information set up in Macola. The item, location, our quantity, and our username. And then we're also going to check this box that says we want to use the bin serial lot collection screen. This is a built-in feature to Form Studio that anytime you check this box, it will pop up an additional screen to collect serial numbers. So what we want to do is pass this information to the collection screen. So our item, our location, and our bin. We're not doing transfers or anything, so the to location and to bin, and this is unrelated to an order, so we're not going to capture any order information. So then we need to go ahead and add our bin properties, and you can see it's going to use the bin and quantity information that we provided above. And likewise on the serial lot screen. So I'm going to put serialized here for our inventory transaction receipt for serialized items. And we're going to go ahead and say next and finish. And now we need to put a formula on this as well to check for serialized. So here we said if it's not equal to S, now we need to check if it is equal to S. So we're going to check our serial lot variable, if that's equal to S. So now, if it's serialized, we're going to do this transaction. If it's not serialized, we're going to do this transaction. Then we also want to add a clear form. So after the business transaction completes, it will clear the form so the user can move on to the next receipt. So now let's go ahead and test our form. And let's say we screw up. Let's test our clear. Yep, clears our form. Close closes our form. So let's go ahead and do a non-lotted, non-binned item to make sure that works. And see how our receive button is grayed out. That's because we said that the enabling element is the quantity. So when we press enter, it will enable our button. And now we can go ahead and do a receipt. And our form clears after the transaction. Now let's go ahead and test a serialized and lotted item. Or actually a binned and lotted item. And our lot, let's just use today's date. And the month. And we're going to go ahead and receive 5. And that worked. So now let's test a serialized item. And here's our serial lot collection screen. And so it's wanting to know what serial number, and we see the quantity remaining down there of 3. So let's enter a serial number And now our quantity remaining is 0. We can go ahead and hit save, and our transaction completes. This concludes the lesson on buttons and adding actions to buttons.